Please. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Can't wait!
Let's go!
Alrighty. Welcome back to another episode of the Big Dogs on Campus. I'm your host Greg, and I got my guy with me, Coach Gio. How you doing, man?
I'm doing real good. It's another day of college football. I have to eat crow from some of the picks I made last week.
Yes,
We don't
sir.
have to talk about it, but just another day of college football, and it was a very exciting weekend, and can't wait to get this one started.
Yeah, I can't wait either. Speaking of Crow, Gio, do we believe? Do we now believe now?
Well, look, it wasn't that I didn't believe, but I guess I believe a few percentages higher, right? I mean, they beat Nebraska, and let's be real, Nebraska. I don't know what's going on offense. Their defense played well though. I mean, they had stops. They were creating some pressures, but just wasn't enough at the end of the day. But kudos to Colorado. They came out, and another coach talking smack to Dion this past week, talking about his glasses and Dion swag and all this stuff. I mean, look, it's a rivalry game, quote unquote, but Colorado probably about to put the brakes on them boys. Against Colorado State. This probably could be a massacre, man. It could be a massacre.
Yeah, I'm already hearing a lot of people say buff by a million. Man, look, with that Nebraska game, it was even from Nebraska's standpoint, even though they probably was the most equipped team to pull it off, they had a great concept on how to kind of slow Colorado down. They did a better job than TCU, in my opinion, of like the beginning portion of that game. It just kind of they made some adjustments in halftime, and Colorado just took it on over, and Jeff Sims didn't help that either. But I think it was a solid win by Colorado. And then with Colorado State, dude, I don't understand what these coaches are trying to do. I was always told, like, back in maybe ever since middle school, like not to give anybody bulletin board material. So it's just kind of weird seeing some of these people go back and forth. With Coach Prime, understanding that Coach Prime is a petty dude, and he's going to respond to everything that you do back to him. So yeah, it's tough for me because me personally, I would wear some shades too. Somebody talk about my character. I'm finna wear some shades too. I don't know.
Well, that Houston, right? They
You said what?
the isn't your team Houston Cougars, right?
Oh yeah.
Are we talking about them today or?
Hey man, look, we can definitely talk about it. We can definitely talk about it. I am not shying away from that because hey, some people need to be on a hot seat just after that performance alone. But I mean, everybody can't be the Georgia Bulldogs, man. Man,
It's somewhere right here, right? See that, G?
hey man, hey look, man, look, hey, y'all got it this year. Y'all got it. You ain't gonna get no argument out of me. After that game, I was like, you know what? Maybe we are a basketball school. Maybe Houston is just a basketball school right now. Let's just stay in our lane. Let's get in our Kansas bag from back in the day. Uh, but before going into other college games, did want to talk about the biggest game that week: Texas versus Alabama. Texas winning against Alabama. Your initial reactions, your thoughts, um, when it all happened.
I mean, I thought again another pick that I was just going off of SEC. I thought Alabama would beat the brakes off them boys in Texas, and man, Texas just looked good. Alabama doesn't look like the Alabama of old. I mean, their defense was on the field a good amount, but just not making those plays when they need to get those defensive stocks. And kudos to Texas and Urs there. I mean, they were really putting the pressure and they were attacking on offense. I mean, they weren't just sitting around, right? Just saying, hey, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They really came to play. And man, Alabama, that quarterback, I mean, look, he made plays, but just wasn't enough. And that was a huge win. But it's funny, I go on Twitter and there's this video saying, "We want Georgia. We want Georgia." So, okay, be careful what you wish for.
Man,
I'm not saying it, but I think this was a great win, though. Remember, Texas goes to the SEC next year, I believe. It's a huge confidence builder to build off of that, the roster that they have. They looked very good. And Alabama, look, they're still Alabama to a certain extent. They have the name, obviously, and they still have really good players. Can they come out the SEC West? It's determined. Ole Miss had a big win against Tulane last week, and LSU, they laid an egg against Florida State, but it's going to be some competition on that West side. But kudos to Texas. They were not afraid. The big stage wasn't, demeaning to them. They really came out, and Quinn, he had 349, 3 touchdowns. I mean, they threw through the air. I mean, man, they just had a solid game, and the quarterback on Jalen. I mean, he played good, but just wasn't that Alabama staple.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty much gonna be my focal point. It was just like, that quarterback was just not making the plays I needed to be made. Now Texas did a good job. I'm not going to sit here and say they didn't. They played a great game. They surprised me. The quarterback is definitely legit over there. But man, that quarterback play on Alabama side, that was like, I mean, there's a reason he's getting benched, and they're trying to do from Notre Dame out coming into this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see. But overall, my thing is, once Texas start, that's the thing about Texas. Texas will win, and then they'll start saying some stuff like, "We want Georgia," and it's just like, yo, baby steps, please. Let's not make it seem like we played the best of Alabama, but still a good win nonetheless. Now, shout out to my guy Kyle. Kyle had here. He said, "What do you think are Alabama's chances of making the playoffs after the loss to Texas?" Now, if it was up to me, wouldn't be in the playoffs. That's just me. Um, that alone would get you out the playoffs, in my opinion. But maybe that's just because I'm from Texas and I just have a little higher expectation. But because it's Alabama, they all wait. If they was to win a certain amount of games, they would probably, in my opinion, they'll give them a 20%, 15% chance if they just rallied and did something crazy, because it's Nick Saban and it's Alabama. And I still think people have like a taste of last year, um of how TCU played out last year. And some people to this day are like, maybe if we would have put Alabama in there instead of TCU, it probably would have been a little bit more entertaining. So I understand where people are coming from. So from a Nick Saban standpoint, I'm gonna give it a 15% chance that actually happens. How
Yeah,
about you,
I think
Q?
they got, it's, Gene, and kudos to Gene, man. he said Texas will win outright last week. The money line. I mean, Gene got it. I mean, it is what it
Shout out to
is.
Gene.
I mean, I find it hard to. They're gonna have to go on a stretch, man. They're gonna have to go on a dominance, right? And winning obviously the SEC. I think right now, I think that's the only chance, unless Texas falters and obviously Michigan, right? Notre Dame's there, Florida State. So many good teams right now. For Alabama to get in with a one loss, all those teams have to get a loss, right? And Alabama probably has to win the SEC. I don't think a 2-loss team is going to be that 4th seed, right? So I'm going to say 0 like Gene does. A lot has to go their way. And Ole Miss, I think that could be a potential loss. So 2 losses probably. And then the SEC championship game, if they get there, it's probably going to be Georgia. But I'm going with 0, man. I didn't see enough on that. And I know it's early, right? But I just didn't see enough.
Yeah, I can definitely understand it because I feel like there's levels to it, at least for this year. I mean, outside of Georgia, I don't see anybody that's just heads and toes, just like, okay, like you're ready to compete for a national championship. Even if Alabama was to go on the stretch, they haven't showed enough football to me to be like, oh yeah, like they might, this is a team I would want to see in the playoffs. And even to a lesser degree, I mean, Texas has a little ways to go before I feel the same way about them. They could talk about Georgia all they want. I don't believe it, and I think they'd get blown out if they was to play today. So, it's just a few things going on. I think with Texas finally beating Alabama, that was pretty much the big circle point, the biggest game of that week. But there was a other few games that came out that were exciting last weekend, but didn't get a lot of love. Didn't get as much love as other teams may have. And for me, I just wanted to give a good old shout out to. I'm trying to pull out the actual team that I was referring to. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? I almost got you. I'm folding. Oh Lord. Iowa State for me. Now, if people weren't really watching that one, I totally understand. But I was thoroughly entertained with that game. Iowa State ended up being 20-13. It was a solid play for me. Another one that was a close second to me. This is probably, it wasn't an undersell, but I was looking at Oregon, Texas Tech last week.
Yeah.
Didn't see a lot of coverage on it, mainly because if you're not Colorado, you're not Georgia, and you're not Alabama, Texas, you're just not going to get that kind of love this season. So,
it's crazy, man. Colorado
shout
just
out to them. Those were those. But how about you for yours? Like, was there any games that you felt like deserved a little bit more love last week?
I was flipping through all the channels and trying to catch a little bit of all the games as much as I could. Appalachian State against UNC. I mean, 40-34. I caught the end of that game. I mean, last year that game was, I think in the 60s, and Appalachian State almost with the upset. Something about those teams playing these last few years, man, real close. But UNC got early up. Obviously Texas, Alabama. But how about Washington State beating Wisconsin? I actually had Washington State winning that game. I thought Cameron Ward had a good day, 2 touchdowns, over 200 yards on the air, but a big win for a program that, over the last few years, they've been trying to build and build and build, and a huge win against a Wisconsin team that I think is, pretty good, right? But for a Pac-12 team, right, at home to win, I thought that was a very solid win. They're 2-0 right now, and looking like a team that could contend in the Pac-12. I'm not going to say Georgia versus Ball State because clearly there wasn't much there. But those 2 games were probably, there were a lot of also blowouts. I mean, yeah, LSU beats Grambling, which we knew that was probably going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
But Tennessee versus Austin Peay. I saw some of that game, and it was 30-13, but I felt like it was a lot closer. Tennessee letting that team kind of hang around. I don't know. Tennessee doesn't look like they were last year. But those are probably the two games that really stood out. And they happened to be a Pac-12 and an ACC team. I did catch some of the LSU Tulane. It was close. Or actually, Ole Miss versus Tulane. I thought Tulane, they played a good game. Just wasn't enough against a SEC school, but it was good to see Tulane, a program last year, having a lot of success, and they coming in and, they look pretty solid.
Yeah, speaking of Pac-12, they were saying, how about the Pac-12 showing up so far with the conference dying, and that's my direct sentiments right there. It's just, hey man, they doing what they can, because there's a lot of moving parts right now. Some of that stuff is just kind of out of their control. Of a team leaving, a team joining. I know that they're trying to get a lot of pressure from certain teams. Notre Dame seems to be, maybe the only few independent schools left, as Army is getting, some shine from American Athletic. They're trying to convince them to come down to the AAC since they lost SMU. So with Geos, how you feeling about these Pac-12 teams, man? I know they're showing out, but do you think this?
Look, they've played well, and offensively, we know about the Pac-12. It's all about the offense. The defense, it's a little bit of an afterthought out there. They really spread the game, and they're really up and down teams, and they're really good teams. And unfortunately, this conference, man, if you look at the next few years, USC's leaving, UCLA, Cal's leaving, right? I believe. So many teams that are leaving, and what you're going to get Fresno State. No disrespect to Fresno or Boise, right? But who are they going to replace these schools with? You're losing some not national powers, right? But really the name of USC, UCLA. You're losing, and Colorado. I believe Washington's also leaving. Look, man, it sucks. But we saw it with the Big East, right? At least in football, right? Like they had to change the name. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah. So Cal and Stanford joined the ACC. It's like, who's left?
Yeah, it's just gonna be. Like I said, these next couple of years, it don't matter what these schools do. If they're not in the Pac-12 or they're about to lead the Pac-12, it just only strengthens the case of why they have to go somewhere else. After it, it just feels like a domino effect.
Oh yeah, no, it's a domino effect, and now, you see the teams are talented, but at the end of the day, it's all about the money, man. It was all about the money, and the money just didn't line up, and now the Pac-12 sitting there like, well, damn, man, maybe we just messed up.
It might be one of those, man. It really might be one of those. I'm not gonna lie to you. I would not be doing my due diligence if I did not add this team to the games that were interesting, but didn't get much media love. Rice versus Houston. Now, I'm not proud to just talk about this at all, but I will say, I grew up all my life. This game tends to be an afterthought. It's easy dub. It's not a real rivalry. There's no real fans over there in the stands. They lost in OT. Houston losing in OT. Yeah, I really have to look at the coaching staff and to see who do I need to put on the hot seat. Who needs to be fired? I'm tired of Dana Holgerson, me personally. I'm pretty much.
Wasn't he at West Virginia, right? Right, he was at West Virginia before.
You said what?
He was at West Virginia, right? Dana Holgerson before. I believe he was, right?
Yeah, and he was at Houston before for a little bit as like an assistant or like a coordinator, or whatever. And then he went to the West Virginia, and then we just got enamored by a Big 12 name, brought him back. and this is what he has to show for us. And it's just like, okay, this is
Greg, to be fair though, Rice does have a quarterback who's been playing, it seemed like, for about 10 years in JT Daniels. And I mean, look, he played well, and I actually just randomly to the channel. I said, "Oh, Rice versus Houston," and I
yeah,
I said,
yeah.
"Hey, what?"
I had the same reaction. I don't care how long JT been there, yo. Because at first for me, um, that this is why I was finna get on Texas for a little bit. Like because Texas played them the week prior, and Texas was kind of struggling. It was only like a 7-point game for a hot little minute, and then they finally like stretched it out. And my first reaction was like, "Oh, Texas, they finna compete this year? Like, yeah, y'all barely beating Rice. Then what we do? We lose the race." So after that, I was just like, "Let me just stop talking about Rice. Maybe they got some good players over there. Maybe they got something cooking over there." I just realized I think they're part of America this year, if I'm not mistaken, American Athletics. So that that's a jump that's a jump for them in the conference. So that's always good, but. Like when somebody when you have a game like that, and you could tell, like the fans came there not expecting to win. So when it was time to rush the stands, and it was like, "Yo," it was the crowd rushed the stadium. It was like 10 people, and half of those was like the athletic staff. Man, it was embarrassing to
Yo, Rice.
bro. Like, come on, bro. This is not what I'm here for, man. This is not. But like I said, it was from a Rice standpoint, very big win. They're making some huge strides with their athletic program, at least on a football standpoint. So I did have to let's shout them out, even though I have no business caring, but I should. So it is what it is. We'll get them. We'll get them next year, I guess. Can't complain. But as we move forward, we talked about exciting games from last week, but the biggest games, in your opinion, for this weekend are, and I'm gonna give it to Gio.
Well, look, y'all know I got a Georgia jersey on, so South Carolina. Look, Georgia's obviously defending champs, right? And they played two teams that no one really even cares about. I really want to see what Beck at quarterback has, because it's not South Carolina of old, but it's still a good team, I think, and I think Georgia will be tested. I think Georgia will win, but I just want to see us play well against South Carolina. It's an SEC opponent, so those type of games you really have to come to play, and there's no letdown. So Georgia versus obviously South Carolina, the first SEC game for the Dawgs. Another SEC game, LSU versus Mississippi State. I mean, look, LSU looked a lot better last week, but that first week against Florida State was just not it. So that's another game, two SEC games that I'm definitely going to be taking a look at. The game slate this week, it's all right. The San Diego State against Oregon State, that's probably going to be a shootout. I'll say this. There's one game, though, I'm interested. Washington versus Michigan State. Michigan State just lost their coach. And kind of a weird... I've heard a lot of stuff coming out of there about Mel Tucker getting the boot, about Michigan State wanting to get under that $100 million contract they gave him.
Yeah.
And, apparently they hired an educator of, I believe, sexual abuse. And I don't know what. It's just so much information. But Michigan State at home against Washington could be another game that could be an upset. But the game slate isn't, I guess, the greatest this week, right? I mean, it kind of reaching for some of the games, but those are a few of the games.
Yeah, and this is why we kind of love when college coaches do what Colorado State does, Yeah, because it's like, all right, well, it's a slow week, so let's turn it up and force people to watch Colorado versus Colorado State. I don't think there was going to be as many eyes on it if Colorado was at a losing start and the coach wasn't saying what he was saying and Dion wasn't responding the way he was responding. And now having college game day there, it's slated to be a 7 p.m. game on on the West Coast side. That's like 10 p.m. for East Coast people. Um, I highly doubted people were going to watch that game, but now they have a chance to watch it. So I think that's going to be a big game by default.
I got a question, Greg.
What's up
How
with it?
surprised would you be if Colorado State upset
I'd be
Colorado?
extremely so. I would be extremely surprised. I wouldn't be as surprised if all this stuff in the media didn't happen. Like for Dion to go double down to get the shades. Like if you get all these shades and you rock out and then you lose, man, I know that press conference gonna look crazy from Colorado State. Like Colorado State, they finna be talking crazy. But I mean, just like a lot of these, just like a lot of these teams where it's just kind of like I'm not gonna say it's forced rivalry, but it's just like rivalries that just came out of the blue. It's not like a notorious like when they was like, oh yeah, we don't like TCU, we don't like Nebraska. They did something back 2 years ago to my son. Like it's not something that's like historical. It's just something that happened like at a random QB camp, and it's like, oh yeah, it stuck with me. It's personal. So that's definitely a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
approach. It's definitely not the same as like, oh yeah, this is the Alabama Clemson rivalry that's been here for brewing for years. Alabama Auburn. That's not like it's not like one of those. So it is
No, yeah,
interesting. It
it's
seems like every week there's somebody that makes things quote unquote personal. So
and it's probably a mixture of, boosting up your team and trying to
absolutely.
get an edge. Look, Colorado State played, I think, Washington State week 1. Cameron Ward had a had a field day on that. I think it was like 50-20 or something like that.
Right.
Man, look, I just didn't think they had to poke the bear like that. Like, just leave Colorado alone, right?
Right.
Let them go through the motions. Now you're perking up their senses, and now I feel like Colorado's gonna want to defend Dion, and
Yeah, you gonna
I would
play
be
that-
shocked, bro. If Colorado State beat Colorado, I would be completely shocked because I just
would
don't
be
think the talent of how many transfers. I mean, this team is just full of transfers, right? I think over 80% of the roster.
Yeah, like most of that roster is transferred, so it's just like they're still trying to gel together. And I think you know what? If Colorado State wins, I would probably actually be more impressed now than I would be if they never talked because now I know that I'm playing. Now that I know, I really know you're playing Colorado like best at their best.
No,
Like,
yeah, it. Now, if USC would say this, okay, all right, like,
oh, okay, yeah, for sure.
but I don't think they're going to be
yeah.
saying say stuff. But
Yeah, it's
it was
just
just a
weird.
weird conference. He's like, oh, my mom told me how to wear my glasses like this. I said, bro, like what?
For what
It
reason?
doesn't matter, man. For what reason are you doing this? But
Yeah, man.
maybe he needed to inspire his team to maybe get their best performance because they're going to need to have the game plan of their life. Just because the talent is just very discrepant. So
Yeah, and it's not like Colorado State is on any national television radar. It's not like they go on national televised games like that. He definitely could have. He definitely could have used that as a way to engineer. Hey, yo, like I know y'all haven't been seeing like my players like that, but y'all need to hone in on this player here. He is a dog. He is a dog. You know what I mean? He could have just highlighted his best players and said, "Hey, yo, this is who I'm finna introduce to national television. I think they're going to be able to play on Sundays one of these days." But he went a different route. He went a different route. I think another game I'm looking forward to seeing Tennessee, Florida.
oh yeah, I forgot
Seeing,
about. I kind of forgot Florida wasn't even in the SEC.
Yeah.
After what I've seen, but
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I will say with Georgia, South Carolina, I think it's going to be a lot closer than what people think. of course, I think Georgia's going to win, but it's not going to be the notorious Ball State blowout at all. This is SEC football, so I do think it's probably going to
Yeah,
be at bare minimum. They're going to keep it close. It may even be a 3 to 7 point game. It might be one of those games depending on. Is it going to be in Georgia? Is it going to be over in South Carolina? Do you know?
I believe it's in Georgia.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Let me just take a look real quick. I think it's gonna be at Georgia. So I mean, the crowd's
Okay.
gonna be,
Oh yeah.
it's gonna be loud over there, and I think Georgia will have enough. But I really want to see Carson Beck. And look, Stetson Bennett's been here the last few years, and he's been kind of wheeling and dealing. He was like 30 years old, as a college quarterback. And then you got Beck, who is, he's not the most athletic guy, but he can make the throws. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but we'll see today as SEC play opens up. And for South Carolina, I mean, Ritter's there. I just want to just see what they look like. Because the last 2 weeks, it's hard to tell, right? You got Ball State,
Yeah.
and then you got, I don't know who we played in week 1, but you got to really, once SEC plays, you say, okay, all right. Because to be fair, their schedule's soft, Georgia. I mean, we did have Oklahoma on the schedule, but that was taken out because they're coming into the SEC. But overall, Georgia's schedule is soft, and finally a true test at home against South Carolina. South Carolina has upset us before, so I'm sure Kirby will have the Dogs ready to play. But
Yeah, man. I was just thinking about that. Yeah. How does it feel to finally have a quarterback that's supposed to be college age at the quarterback position? Like,
you
how
know,
does that?
you
How
know
does
that
that
whole
feel?
that whole thing with Stenson was just a weird, right? Because to start the season, which was our first championship in a while,
Yeah.
he's like fourth string. It's like nobody was thinking about him,
Mm.
and JT Daniels gets hurt. They're battling, and then he takes the job, and I mean, he just kept playing, and Kirby's like, man, we can't bench this guy, right?
Right.
They already made a blunder before when they let Justin Fields go, and they kept Jake Fromm here. And to be fair to Jake, he had that great freshman year, right? Took us a championship game,
Yeah.
and then everybody know Tua and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
it's good to have a young quarterback back there. But Stetson was just so good at Georgia, making reads and making plays with his legs, and that's one thing that just the making the plays with the legs was just huge, right? Especially in college football. The teams are throwing blitzes everywhere nowadays, and just to get out the field. But it was good to see, and it was finally good to see Georgia actually win. But to win back to back, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because it's like people are like, "Hey, are they going to win a third?" I'm like, I mean, we got 2 straight national championships. How greedy as a fan can I be to
Right.
just sit there and say, "Hey, I want another"? Like, I understand how hard it is, and Georgia has 1 loss in basically 2 years.
That's crazy.
That's impressive for them to run that streak as they've done. And obviously, Ohio State was. I mean, I knew going into that game, Greg, that we were going to be tested mightily. And the defense, I saw a lot of holes, especially in that LSU game, the championship game the week before, kind of slinging it around. But it's finally good to have a young quarterback there. I prefer the backup, and then I think it's Venegriff or whatever the case may be. But Beck's our guy, and they're rolling with him, and we'll see. First true test of the season. And also Florida, Tennessee. I could see Tennessee losing. I didn't love what I saw last week from the time I
Right.
watched that game. Florida's coming in battered, and no one's giving them a chance. Especially on the road. I think it's a road game.
Yeah, I
this
think it's
week.
a road game. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, Tennessee, Florida. I believe that that's going to be and all these. I feel like all these SEC games that are matching up with each other. Anything can happen in those games. So I try not to rule anything out. I try not myself as a betting man myself not to bet on the SEC when they play each other. Just just bad optics on my part. So I'm gonna sit that one out, but I'm gonna watch from afar. But I will say, Looking at some redemptions this past week, we do have our marginal Heisman watch of the week. Has there been a special player that may not be Heisman worthy at this point that made a huge impact, impressed you, did anything that said, okay, yo, a lot more people need to be honed in on this guy right here? Um, at least for me, got to give it to Marvin Harrison with the bounce back. Um, I was very high on Marvin Harrison. I was like, if there's any wide receiver in, um, you know, in college football that can win a Heisman Trophy at this point, it was going to be him. Very rocky, slow start for him. Week 1, week 2, definitely exploded. Definitely excited to see more of him. And then sneaky because I don't like to give Texas his props. But Quinn Ewers, he did his thing against Alabama. He played a great game. Shout out to Gene. Talking about he's the second best QB prospect in the nation. IMO. Hey, he's in that conversation. I will say that. He may not be definitively, but he's in that conversation. He's been making some noise. But how about you, Coach? You got anybody?
I mean, look, I thought my number one guy right now is Caleb. Jordan Travis didn't have the best game last week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the score would indicate they put up almost 70 against Southern Miss, but I thought he played well. And if Florida State goes on a run, right, they go undefeated, and he has a hell of a year, I really like potentially his chance. I think Caleb does have a lot of tough matchups kind of sprinkled in throughout the year. But Jordan Travis, Michael Pickens Jr., didn't have the best game last week. But again, the score, people will take a look at, they threw big against Tulsa. But right now, outside of the quarterback position, man, I don't really see anyone else. Harrison had a good day, but they played Youngstown State, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think it was Youngstown State. But besides outside the quarterback position and some of the kind of the obvious names, I don't see any other position right now. But I think Caleb, if he's on this arc, Shedeur Sanders, I think he did drop down, Greg, after last week's performance.
Oh yeah, I think
it's Nebraska's defense played well. I mean, at certain points they were really pressuring, and that game was obviously closer in the first half. But I think he did dip, though. If we're talking about guys that may have dipped, Sanders didn't have the performance that I thought maybe he could have.
For sure.
I guess the team that was offensively, let's just say they were not very good.
Yeah, Jeff Sims didn't make it like that great for their offense. I do think for Shedeur, the only thing that I will say about that is the fact that second half he was able to make those adjustments and then continue to turn into the Shedeur that we kind of saw from week 1 in TCU. And I think we all kind of established that was good Lennon. I think we all kind of established that he's not going to have 500-yard plus games every year. I mean, not every year, but every week, every weekend. So it's very imperative to see just continual growth, consistency. That's basically what we want to see out of Shedeur. And I think Shedeur is going to be back next year anyway, with Travis Hunter that's going to be here, the following year as well. Just to kind of build on that and to build on the prospect. So me personally, I kind of came into this season not even thinking he was going to be. We weren't even going to be talking about Heisman.
That's true, though. Yeah, that's a good point, Greg. We weren't even really thinking about him. But I think if that game would have went, if he would have balled out again, and then obviously he's had, I think USC coming up, Oregon.
Yeah.
Man, if he still got a shot, I think, though. I think
for sure.
He's there. He'll have to have kind of that Heisman moment as everyone does have. And we'll see. But, man, he could be, if you look at him in the NFL side, I think he could be special.
Yes.
I think he'd be very special. And his dad, his dad's coached him right throughout his entire. Does his dad go to the NFL? I mean, that's a topic for another discussion. But
Yeah.
does he take his talents? Deion's always said he's not an NFL type of coach, but it'll be interesting to see, the Falcons or some team that says, hey, maybe if we get Sanders, we can get that other Sanders and could really change. Because we've seen college coaches go to the NFL, right? And
Yeah.
besides Jimmy Johnson, right, from back with the, I just don't know, and I could be wrong. I'm trying to think how many straight up college coaches. I mean, Nick Saban wasn't terrible in Miami, but the players were like, nah, some of the stuff he's saying is just too much. I'm trying to think. I mean, we've seen what's the coach over there? Ole Miss. It's just on the tip of my tongue. Was it Lane Kiffin, right?
Yeah, Lane Kiffin. Pete Carroll.
Yeah, Pete Carroll is the exceptional. Carroll was in the NFL before he went to college, or at least when he made it, big with he was coaching the Patriots, right? He got to the playoffs, and then he went to USC. But yeah, Pete Carroll would be a guy that would be a bit of an exception to the rule. That he did spend a good time. But Pete Carroll was smart though. Pete got out right before a lot of those investigations started happening.
Yeah, that boy Pete was slick with it.
Yo, Pete was like, hey, you know what? I'm out, yo. Because now Reggie Bush, I believe, is suing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about that another topic, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, some of the college coaches just have not. You got Rule, right? He goes to Carolina and just doesn't work out. Now he's at Nebraska, so it's tough for those college coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, at least for me, it's like I with Deion. I mean, Deion can say a lot of things, and I'll be like, yeah, that's cool. Like even when he was talking about Jackson State, I'm like, you're not going to stay here long. Like you're not going to stay here for years and years and years. Like I can see what kind of vision you're trying to do, but I wasn't buying it. And even with Colorado, I don't even think Colorado will be his last destination from a college standpoint. If he decides to continue on,
Greg, would you give him?
That I will.
How much money would you, if you're an athletic director, right, and you're sitting at a school that similar to Colorado, how would you throw the whole bag? Just say, hey,
yes,
we
would.
Somehow, some way, we got to get Deion.
Oh, that's what Colorado did. It was like, hey, yo, we don't have.
They didn't even have the money.
We will find the money for you, but hey, this is the money we're willing to give you. We don't have it yet, but you're gonna have to trust and believe we're gonna give it to you.
They didn't have the money. That's crazy.
That is crazy to admit.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
they actually admitted, like, yo, let's set a GoFundMe account, and yo, can we get some donations?
I have not. It's been a long time since I've seen that kind of vulnerability from a D1 college, especially from an athletic program perspective. But I mean, look, vulnerability got them a great coach. So, I mean, if I was a director right now, whatever he would want, I would try my best to go get it. Like, it's that simple. Because I don't think outside of Nick Saban, I don't know who is on Deion's level at this point when it comes to a recruiting standpoint of getting a kid to play for him. At this point,
he's he has the it. And I thought the other day, man, how many having a track like Deion, or was because he doesn't have the traditional college football kind of arc. What other coach? And I sat down and I'm trying to think who would have that just bang, right? Like he's hired and just sets the world on fire. And I sat there and I'm like,
I don't know.
Man, what other player? Like Michael Irvin? No. I mean, he screams a lot, right? But no.
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
out here talking about catching footballs with his chest.
Catching footballs with his chest, and
that's crazy.
He also used to do some other stuff that we won't talk about. But
exactly.
It's like, look, is there anybody else who would come in and say, man, this is it? I had a hard time finding somebody who would come and that I think besides Deion, who would say, "Damn man, Tom Brady."
I can't even see that one. I just think that somebody like Tom Brady is just too. I don't think his patience is there. I don't
Yeah,
think he got.
it's
I don't think
just
he got the pay. And I don't think people talk about Deion Sanders' patience when it comes to these kids. You gotta have a lot of patience to get through
look.
these
I
bumps.
coached high school football for 2 years, Greg.
Yeah,
You need patience, man.
yeah, bro.
You tell
I'm
this kid,
saying.
look, I need you in the A gap. How many times I tell you, you got to be in the A? They all the way in the C. I said, well, we went over this all week, and in the game, you out here doing your own thing. Why? Why?
For
It's
what reason?
patience. Patience.
Yeah, I think. I mean, look, off of the top of my head, I don't even know the resume of how Ray Lewis teaches kids, but if Ray Lewis could ever put it together, that might be something. But like I said, it's very difficult for to have a spark like Dion just instantaneously, just magic. It's a combination of success versus, from a parental standpoint, LeVar Ball kind of confidence
Yeah. You know,
combined with each other. And it's just like, man, it's like there's a lot of people that don't like how Dion does things, but they're winning games and they're being successful and they
they're
got
being
the recruits.
successful.
And it's like, you can't even, it's hard to hate on that. You just don't like how they're doing it. That's cool. Everybody's not going to like you. But
No,
man,
no, no. And he's going to rub
it
people the wrong way
he's gonna run,
sometimes.
yeah, and he knows that. But it's just like, it's very hard to replicate without it coming off as forced and unnatural and just like, oh, you're trying to copy somebody. Nah, this is Dion's one of a kind.
No,
That's
no.
basically what
He's
I'm
a
getting
special, and the man played baseball. I mean, he played
in the World Series,
for
man.
in the World Series. It's like he's done it all. You know, Kyle said Peyton Manning. I don't know,
I
man.
don't see it. I don't even see that. I ain't gonna lie to you.
I mean, it's kind of like looking like Eli. I mean, half the time Eli's pictures, he looks like dumbfounded. It's like he's just staring, like, you know what I'm saying. It's
Yeah,
just
you know what I mean.
Peyton. I mean, would be interesting. I think Peyton has clearly more charisma than Eli does. But I'm still looking, and whenever I come with a guy, I'll come on here, Greg, and say, "Oh, how about so and so?" But until then, I can't find nobody right now.
I just think that I just feel like the defensive side of football has a little bit more patience than the offensive side of football. So that's why it's easy for me to just go Ray Lewis, Dion,
You're right, though.
Richard Sherman, if he ever decided to do something like that. But it's just like it's like they have that correct.
Bro, wasn't Pat McAfee on the WWE last?
Oh yeah,
Few days-
with the Wayne the Rock Johnson, yeah, he was
yeah,
was
wasn't
there.
he just on? Pat McAfee's interesting. He is. I mean, he's getting paid a lot of money. Definitely got
Yeah.
that charisma. I would like to see though Pat as a head coach. But one thing that people don't talk about, I'll mention about Dion, is the staff. Is the
Yeah, that
staff that
staff
he's
is
able to put
crazy.
together, man.
Mhm.
I mean, even at
Jackson State.
yeah, check and say he had Mike Zimmer, right? He had an actual head coach of the Vikings, right? Gets let go. He's got Mike Zimmer, and I'm not sure if Mike's there now at Colorado State, but the staff that he's able to put together is just he got the head coach from Kent State to come to Colorado as the offensive coordinator. Forgot the name, but he gave Georgia some fits a few years ago when we played him on offense. Just the mind that he's able to put together, the staff, man, like the staff does matter in football because there's so many different, philosophies and different ideas of attacking the game. Man, this dude, the staff that he put together is just another tip on the cap. Is just, man, Dion. I wish I could be Dion. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, that's
with the glasses, it's just, hey man, Dion, bro. He's it.
Dion is a different breed. Than that, and that goes without question. But I will say, that you bring up a good point. Just like he has to recruit his players, being able to recruit a coaching staff. It was even more impressive to recruit, a coaching staff with NFL experience to go to a HBCU, than to recruit even a bigger, more well-established staff to go to a Colorado football team that was 1-11 the year prior. It's just some storybook stuff that you just don't really see every time. Um he said, I know one thing, Dion needs to calm down. Hunter, that man won't last the whole season playing both sides. Yeah, that is a conversation we did have. Um but I also believe that Travis Hunter is a little different than others. That man's uh pace and stamina is so different.
No,
That is a different dude. After that TCU game, and I saw the man dance, and I was like, this is
yeah,
man,
he's a
man's just
special
different. I
kid,
don't know.
man. And it is Dion's done a good job of kind of managing, right? Because look, he can't play the amount of offensive snaps they had, especially week 1 against TCU,
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
going back and forth. But another guy I want to mention that they got on the staff, Charles Kelly, defensive coordinator, was a defensive assistant with Alabama. That's the type of guys he's bringing in with that culture, right? The winning mentality, bringing guys in who know how to win and have been successful at certain points of their career, obviously winning and kind of bringing that mentality. But yeah, Hunter, man, he a two-way player. It's special.
Special. Before we get out of here, definitely wanted to bring a new segment to the topic. College football hot takes of the week. Something that you can stand on, something that you may think is unpopular, or popular, but it's just something that you're standing on, at least for this season or even for years to come. I don't know if you have one for you, Gio. I don't know if you're ready for that one, but
Hot take. Look, I'm going against the grain,
okay.
and it's probably not a hot take though. Georgia will not repeat
Oh, okay.
as national champions. I just don't see a three-peat. If they do, look, I will gladly come on here and eat crow. I will gladly have my championship hat on and eat crow. But my hot take is Georgia will not three-peat. They will stumble along the way, whether that's in the regular season or when they get to the postseason. I think they will stumble, and I don't think they're going to have the edge. I haven't seen that edge that I've seen the last 2 years on defense yet. We'll get the SEC play, and I can give. But as a Georgia fan, look, I could see that this might not be a national championship team right now. It could clearly change, but my hot take is they will not three-peat. A lot of people think they will. Some people saying they're not, but I'm going to go with they will not three-peat. If they do, like I said, y'all won't hear the last of me. Y'all going to put me on mute on those chats because I'm going to be saying three-peat nation, but I take Georgia won't win.
So my only rebuttal to that is, if you don't think Georgia's going to repeat, who's the team that's going to win this year?
That's a hell of a question. And right now, if I was to say, I'm going to go with Michigan.
I can't see it.
I think Michigan can put it together. The thing is, though, the playoffs, Michigan just, when they get to the playoffs, it seems they get they get exposed.
Yeah.
And when you get exposed like that in the playoffs, and they seem to, TCU, they had it. It was right there, and they just couldn't close the deal. Now, were they going to beat Georgia in the championship game? Heck no.
Right.
And if they do again, then Georgia's probably going to beat them. But I'm going to go with Michigan because, man, they've been knocking on that door. Greg. And if it's not Georgia, I'm going to give it to Michigan. I think they'll have enough. Look, Texas, they're kind of the newcomers. Florida State, Ohio State. I got to see more from the Buckeyes. I think the last 2 weeks, especially that first week against Indiana, just didn't look like themselves. Obviously, they have a new quarterback. But when you look at that top 10, If it's not Georgia, Penn State, Washington's interesting. Notre Dame had a great second half last week. But if it's not them, I have to go with Michigan by default because I don't trust Penn State. Tennessee, I do not trust them. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose to Florida. And LSU, that loss against Florida State, it just, the body language. It's one thing to lose, but your body language. And I'm going to go with Michigan by default. But if Georgia plays Michigan again, I think Georgia would just do the same physicality that they did before. But you're right, though, Greg. If it's not Georgia, then who is? And right now, I think it's a little too early to tell. Because who knows? Can Colorado, if they run the floor, right? If they go undefeated and they win the Pac-12, would you put them in the playoffs?
Me personally, I would try to find a way, and it would make financial sense for it to happen. Like it would make financial sense to get them in the playoffs. At bare minimum, they get that.
If they go undefeated, Greg, they would scare me as a Georgia fan because they play very similar to Ohio State last year.
Yeah,
and we saw the speed Ohio State was. I mean, Marvin Harrison.
And they're still gelling. Like
Marvin Harrison was just crazy that game. If he don't get hurt, I mean, shout out to Georgia's corners last year. But man, that boy can play. Colorado would actually scare me if they run the table, go undefeated in the playoffs. That would be a team that would really, as physical as Georgia is, can they get to him? Can they pressure him? But as of right now, if it's not Georgia, I got to go with Michigan. There's really nobody else right now that I'm going to put over Michigan because Michigan's been knocking, right? They've been knocking, and guess what they've been doing? They've been going home as soon as they start knocking. So
exactly. Yeah, it's one of those like Michigan is like kind of like the Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings to me. It's like you're just gonna have to like prove it. Like I don't really believe your record could be good. You're just gonna have to prove it that you're gonna actually do it, and that's the banners would have to flying, and the clock would have to be saying 0 before I just believe that Michigan can win one because they actually did it. But yeah, I see what you're doing. You know what I mean? I see what you're doing, Gio. You're trying to lower the expectation.
Whoa.
You're trying to lower the expectations so that you can have a piece. Look, I do it with the Cowboys all the time. I lower the expectations so that I can have a peaceful Saturday every weekend. I don't have to count the weeks just in case somebody slips up and now I got to do mental calculations. If I just go out there and say we don't win the Super Bowl, we don't go deep in the playoffs, then I can be pleasantly surprised at the end when it actually happens. I see what's going on. That's why I had to pose the I posed the question for a reason. You can't give me a definitive team right now that could win a championship outright, which means to me it's like, okay, I understand. Because if you have the expectation, if you hype yourself up, it's like, okay, like, it's better to
you could be right, Greg. You could be right.
It's not even I don't even think it was intentional, but I psychologically I think you're just like, let's not think about the 3-peat. Let's just focus. You like you coach Gio. Take it one game at a time.
Just take it one game. Look, if they 3-peat though, look, I mean, it's special, man. I couldn't say enough. If they can get the 3,
that's crazy. Yeah,
that would be crazy in this era and this transfer portal and all this and that. Kirby Smart. I mean, to win 3 championships to get to 4 would be a remarkable, feat.
For sure. And speaking of errors, that goes into my hot take that I'll say real quick before we go. I think Nick Saban and Alabama are done. When I say done, I'm saying that
make sure we got this on tape now.
I think they're done. But like I'm not talking about like just this season. I'm just saying like in totality, they will never have a dominant decade like they had 10 years ago, or like that run of pure dominance from 2012 to 2019.
They were just dominant.
having 5 stars sitting on the bench for 2.5, 3 years just to start their senior year. You got a
You're
whole
right.
bunch of rest. It's never happening again. Once that transfer portal happened and Nick Saban got a little sassy
That's it.
and in the press conference, we knew what time it was. He got cooked. That's why he was throwing shades at Deion Sanders for using the transfer portal.
You're right.
Dabo Sweeney thought he was slick talking about that
Dabo.
transfer
Sweeney.
portal. It's cool. It's a new day and age. It's a new era. People don't redshirt anymore. We just transfer. So that's something. And look, he had a NFL farm for like 10 years. We get it. You know what I mean? There's no way that Tua Tagovailoa was supposed to be on anybody's bench, and Mac Jones was supposed to be a third stringer. There's no way a quarterback room was supposed to be that deep, especially for a Alabama program that's mainly known for running the rock and defense. And you had these levels of quarterback that are all in the NFL being starters. No, you know what you were doing. You know what you was doing. You was exploiting them kids, man. It was cool. It's cool. You had your run. It's never going to happen again. It's never going to happen again. Not from you. And I'm not saying that Nick Saban won't slip his way into a national championship one of these days, once every blue moon, depending on how long he stays. All these coaches are pretty old. But I will say your dominance in national college football is done. It's time. If the torch has not been passed already, it needs to be passed. I would prefer Deion Sanders. But if you want to use another coach, that's fine. If you want to use Kirby Smart, that's fine. But you're not going to have that dominance is over. And I don't think any college football program is going to have a that kind of dominance ever again with the transfer portal. So that's my hot take. You're done,
Greg. I mean, you hit the nail on the NIL.
Yeah,
that is what has happened. And Dabo Sweeney, it's crazy, man, because he's like, oh, we'll start paying players. I'm gonna have to get a new job. Boy, Dabo,
yeah.
If you don't straighten up, especially that Duke loss you had, which was crazy. Terrible.
Stupid crazy.
And then last week, look, I know they ended up blowing out Georgia Southern, but I put on that, it was 14-14. It's like, what's going on? And he said it. You start paying players, and it's Clemson. Now what happens is you got to tell your boosters, hey, can you dig a little deeper? Like, we trying to get so-and-so and this, so-and-so that, right? And this also puts a lot of stress on your boosters. Georgia right now, they're able to, they won the last 2 years, so like the name, the championships. But look, it's tough. And you're going to have to, guys will say, hey, if I ain't playing, why am I going to stay here for 4 years? And I'm out. I'm going to go play somebody else. And there was players on Georgia who left. It was just, it's a different game. And I love to see it. In the words of that Colts owner, Jim Irsay, when he said, I love to see it. And I love to see it.
I love to see it. Because it's like you're not going to be able to get kids off of just the name alone anymore. Those days are, it's Alabama. Okay, well, USC is paying me $12 million. So either you, and they're going to let me start. And they're going to let me play both ways. So, I mean, look, you know what I mean? Like, and their jerseys look a little better, you know what I mean? So you're going to have to prove it to me that putting a number on the side of my helmet is worth it and sitting on the bench. Because I know you're not going to pay. Yep. You're not going to pay me $12 million just to sit on the bench. I don't even think there's NFL players that do that right now. So, it's great. Spreading the talent out is perfect for the expanded playoff. Yes, absolutely.
It is.
Now, I will say we did take a step back with TCU not playing up to their performance. But I will say hopefully we get somebody like a USC, something like a Pac-12 team that in there that kind of mix it up so it's not always Big Ten and SEC heavy. If we get other teams from other conferences in these playoff conversations and they win and they move, past the first round, it kind of legitimizes all of the Power 5 conferences instead of the narrative always being, okay, this is a cute run, but you're going to get smacked by Alabama by 40 once you get to the top 4, or the top 5, top 6, top 7, whatever it may be. So hopefully that's why I'm really rooting for Caleb Williams to dominate so that you have a different kind of face or a different kind of team in the college football playoffs that can compete for real, not this TCU mess. Like you can actually compete and
No,
get
yeah,
a championship. Yeah.
I think it's a good thing, and I think it's really good though. USC is going to the Big Ten, and I think
Right.
it's going to force USC to really look on their defensive side of the football
Yeah.
because as someone who lives in the Midwest country, right, a lot of these teams are going to run the ball, right? It's cold, it's raining,
Right.
it's like that weather's gloomy, and it's going to force them to look on their defensive side. Says, hey, we're really going to have to really keep
Keep
up
up. Mm-hmm.
and play a little bit more physical, but also continue to air it out as they do with the speed on the field. And it's still the name USC because they have the offense, right? Their defense is the part where, and also the line of scrimmage too, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what kind of separates some of the teams is how dominant. That's why I thought Colorado could be maybe another year behind, just because, man, like
The trenches is
the
a whole
trenches
other level. Yeah.
and can they hold up for the entire year? We'll see, but it's great for college football, and you're going to get upsets. Not the whole March Madness upsets, but
But
you're
you'll get
going to
something.
get like Utah State, maybe going into Michigan, right? Or you're going to see some of those in the next few years as they expand to. I think it's going to expand to 8, if I'm not wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
eventually
so.
it's going to be 8. Yeah, so.
Hey, man, Houston, get your ish together, man. We ain't been dominant in quite some time. We gotta get that.
When were they
together.
dominant, Greg? I'm trying to remember.
From a conference standpoint, probably
Yeah.
2015, 2016 was probably
Okay.
like our most recent dominance. I think Greg Ward Jr. was there.
Yeah.
Derrick King was playing receiver at the time, which was kind of crazy. Tom Herman was the head coach, so that was Ed Oliver. We had some dogs out there, and I think our highest rate was like 5th or 6th at the time. And then there was head coach rumors that he was going to leave for Texas, and that kind of just everybody folded after that. You just lost to SMU, you lost to Navy. It's like, hey, yo, come on. After beating Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson, you started just losing all of a sudden. So it's like, all right, yo, okay, y'all not ready for the big leagues. But had the playoffs expansion happen during that time, we would definitely be in there though. So hopefully somebody outside I don't think Dana's going to be that person that's going to do it, but
No.
whoever the next person is going to be, hopefully we can get that together. And because football, man, football is king in Texas. We gotta do something.
Yeah, no, it's I played high school football in Florida, which is big, but Texas has always been known to. I mean, their football their high school football stadiums.
Yeah, bro, it's crazy.
And the money.
Our graduating class, like our graduate. I think my graduating class was 1,400, like for seniors, it was 1,400, and that was on the lighter side. Like there was some bigger ones, so I'm just like, okay, like the amount of money they put in, it's like old college football. The way they treat high school football out here, where it's just like of the exploitation of kids because they not getting paid. Like, I mean,
they got the money
officially paid, but how that
I
works.
know what you mean. I mean, they got the money though. Texas A&M doesn't seem to be using that money very well
At all.
at all. And I think Jimbo Fisher, that contract was a travesty. And I don't know if they just end up still keeping him for another year or two, but Texas A&M, you love to see it.
I would cut base, honestly. They make enough money to just cut it off completely.
Yeah.
Texas is trying to do a better job. They were in that same realm, just not utilizing their money to the best of their abilities. They're just throwing money at the wall and just seeing whatever sticks. But now they're being a little bit more strategic. So, it'll be interesting to see that. But this has been a great episode, a great topic. Gio, as always, it's always a pleasure to talk college football with you. Always have a great mind for the game. Always love seeing one of us eat crow every once in a while for some picks that we did the week before. And big guy Melvin, he'll be back next week, I think. And we can continue this conversation and see what happens this past weekend and look forward to what's going on next week, man. Any last words?
I'll be headed to a game over here in Indiana. The Hoosiers are playing the Cardinals of Louisville at Lucas Oil Stadium, so I'm heading over there to watch. And hoping for a good day of college football. And also, you heard it here first. And this is some NFL talk here. The Rams are going to upset the San Francisco 49ers. You heard it here first. You didn't hear it nowhere else, but you heard it here first. We're going to shock the world. And I'm trying to be like LeVar Ball. I'm trying to speak it.
You speak it into existence. Speak it into existence. Hey, look, I'm not mad at it. I'm not a fan of the 49ers at all, so I understand. Hey, look, go ahead. I hope that happens. And for I think Syjan, whoever did that last minute, hey yo, go ahead, tap into both. What's stopping you from watching both? Go ahead, do both. But if I had to, I'm personally gonna watch the Colorado game because it's gonna happen later that night. I don't know when Kansas State happens, but I don't think there's a lot of games happening that late at night besides Colorado.
Yeah,
so
it's weird, man. Like before Deion, I never thought I'd be watching a Colorado game last week and sitting here watching. No way that. Hey, look, I see where you're coming from. I see it.
I understand.
But I'm just trying to speak it into existence. It don't mean I'm gonna be right.
I hope he's right though. Nah, man, but it's been a pleasure, man, and for the big dogs on campus, we will see you once again next week, man. Have a good one.
To the team.